Greetings fellow gamers, I'm the Soulsborne Seeker and today I'll be reviewing Kotama and Academy Citadel, an anime-themed science fiction Metroidvania title developed by Atomstring Games and released on the 14th of January 2026 for PC. The story thrusts you into the role of Kotama, a mysterious exchange student that recently joined the Carmel Academy, an institution celebrated as the pinnacle of cutting-edge technology. Needless to say, Carmel is not your everyday school, with danger lurking around every corner and the survival of the fittest mentality reigning supreme as every student has their eye on the coveted Carmel Star prize, a prestigious title that is up for the taking every 100 years, with the next election for its claiming being just around the corner and everyone, including yourself, eager to win the crown. Thus, you embark on a mission to earn enough votes so that you can end up ahead of the other contenders, a process that will pit you against some of the fiercest members of the Academy, which hides a lot of mysteries of its own. While the narrative will come off as fairly standard to people familiar with anime tropes, I have to admit that it worked really well within the context of the game's Metroidvania nature, since it wove exploration and storytelling seamlessly by tying your very investigation of the school to your overall purpose, effectively making each new room a possibility to get more votes, which is a fundamental aspect of gameplay as we will see later on. I'll admit I found myself enjoying the happenings much more than I thought I would, though there were a few issues here that need to be addressed. First and foremost, when it came to automatic dialogue instances, they tended to disappear quite quickly, often before I had a chance to read the full sentence, so it would be a good idea to slow those down a bit. Second, there were a few situations where text segments had not been translated to English, both in terms of conversations as well as tutorials, though I will admit that I was still able to understand what was explained through context, so it didn't bother me that much. Third, following every major boss fight I was treated to a placeholder image instead of the proper story art, but the subtitles still worked, so I was able to deduce what was happening. Finally, I feel like it would have been great if voice acting had been present here, since it would have definitely added to the overall ambience, though that's not really an issue but rather a personal preference. The Academy itself lives up to its reputation as an uncanny school to be in, with its biomes being few but quite diverse, significantly expansive, and surprisingly lore-heavy if you want to take the time and go through the numerous informational entries you will unlock during your exploration of the place, though I have to say that overall, the map design was quite boxy and not that imaginative, which made certain areas appear fairly generic and bland. Speaking of exploration, Carmel boasts an impressive number of secrets, with each separate biome being densely packed and ripe for discovery. Your investigation will bring you across a total of 10 types of collectibles, namely chronopetals, life jade shards, weapons, temporalis, journal entries, banned films, memo cards, quest items, luminite, and finally, temporal coils. Chronopetals increase your health pool when gathered in groups of 3. Similarly, life jade shards add an extra life jade in your defensive arsenal when collected thrice, which essentially acts as an additional defense in case your health bar depletes, at which point the shard breaks in order to keep you from perishing. Weapons refer to 3 different armaments you'll get to collect and utilize against your foes, upon which I will expand in the combat section. Temporalis is a precious stone that allows you to enhance your weapons with special offensive abilities that deal massive damage. Journal entries, which take the form of ethereal umbrellas, unlock pieces of lore that further flesh out the setting. Banned films correspond to a total of 12 different key items, whose acquisition is connected to the game's true ending. Memo cards are accessories that offer certain combat and exploration related benefits. Said trinkets can be equipped in limited capacity at first, with more space for them being progressively unlocked at a merchant, at which point you can increase the number you can have active at any given moment. Quest items, as the name suggests, are special collectibles related to certain tasks offered by NPCs in exchange for rewards. Luminite is the game's main currency and is utilized both for purchasing items from merchants, but also as fuel for the game's healing system, which I will also be covering during the combat section. Finally, temporal coils are special artifacts that are related to one of the game's main gimmicks, and that is a limited form of time travel. More specifically, whenever you move from one room to another, you will notice that the temporal coil will be removed from your inventory, resulting in the in-game time to progress by 1 hour. This internal clock is actually tied to the title's quest system, with certain NPCs and events only being available before or after a certain time slot, which effectively makes you think tactically about the way in which you will approach navigation of the map when it comes to specific tasks you wish to accomplish, in order to make sure you get the timing right. Said time progression happens once per door you pass through, and resets whenever you save at a main save point, thus allowing you to try again in case of failure, and you will want to try again if you wish wish to go for 100%, since almost all of these tasks yield votes that increase your vote percentage, which you need to fill up as much as possible if you want to get the best ending. In all honesty, this system sounds way more complicated than it actually is, since all that will be required of you will be some basic observation of the map overview in order to determine the right path to follow by counting how many rooms you'll have to pass through and deciding the ideal course by calculating which route will allow you to get to your goal before the given time limit, but I still felt like it added some welcome spice to quest completion. Speaking about the map, I'm really glad to report that Kotama and Academy Citadel does a truly good job at making the overview efficient to a large extent. First and foremost, the map automatically marks any points of interest you come across, such as quest locations, memo cards, NPCs, and fast travel spots. You're also provided with a total of 50 manual markers to place wherever you want, which I highly recommend you start doing from the get-go, since even though most items and locations of importance are marked the moment you come across them, there are a few that don't, so save yourself some trouble and be proactive about your future exploration of places you cannot access at the moment of first discovery. Do keep in mind that some items that don't get automatically marked from the get-go will do so after the completion of certain quest lines, but it's best for you to play it safe in order to avoid any headaches relating to full map completion. Moving on to platforming, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that Kotama and Academy Citadel has numerous challenging acrobatic gauntlets to beat, and I say that because at first glance the game feels, and to be fair, largely is combat-oriented. Carmel Academy actually boasts some truly challenging platforming segments that, at times, require a degree of creativity and outside-the-box thinking to beat, though I will say that there is a certain issue here that kind of marred the overall platforming experience. Said issue is related to the dash ability, which, at times, did not trigger for me even though I had pressed the appropriate button, thus sending me plunging to my doom. There was no rhyme or reason as to why that was happening, and it wasn't connected to any dash cooldown mechanic, since I tested it under the same circumstances numerous times in order to conclude that it is indeed an issue. I'll admit it was more hit than miss, but when it missed it really hurt, especially during one of the game's optional and unreasonably challenging platforming trials, which I managed to get halfway through before perishing and deciding against actually completing it. In addition, there's another, smaller issue connected to this aspect of the game, and that is the fact that the main character animations can come off as a bit choppy and abrupt at times, essentially lacking the fluidity necessary for seamless platforming traversal, which can make getting through these gauntlets an awkward endeavor at times. Finally, there's a very important platforming move that is never actually explained to you, which I decided to call the slime slingshot. I eventually discovered said move by accident while trying to figure out how to access some seemingly inaccessible areas after I had gotten every single traversal skill available, and in case you also get stuck, this move is related to certain sections that have a thrust point right next to an iron gate obstacle, and to perform it you need to press both the thrust button as well as the buttons that turn you to a slime near simultaneously. Combat, on the other hand, felt great across the board, and is definitely the game's main event. On a basic level, you have a total of 3 weapons at your disposal, starting with an umbrella, which packs a good punch but is short-ranged, before eventually getting a whip, which was my weapon of choice due to its combination of long range and decent damage output, and finally finding the twin blades, which are also short-ranged but ridiculously fast, effectively turning you to a meat grinder. All 3 of them can be upgraded at a merchant in order to increase their damage levels, as well as enhance them with special abilities which you can activate periodically in order to completely decimate your foes. Battle is further heightened by a damage build-up system. In essence, hitting enemies continuously as well as parrying their attacks eventually coats them in a purple liquid, which you can then detonate with a powerful hit in order to not only deal a world of hurt, but also to leech health points from them. Leeching aside, healing can also be carried out by standing still and focusing for a few seconds, which leads to the recharging of your health bar at the cost of luminite, your currency. This is actually the first time I've seen this healing system, which I thought was a stroke of genius since it kept currency relevant even after I had purchased everything from merchants, and didn't tie me down to any health vials or similar items that usually require save points or combat in order to replenish, thus affording me complete freedom to explore as long as I had stocked enough luminite for the ride, which, trust me, you're gonna wanna do if you plan on tackling the aforementioned platforming nightmare. Memo cards are also of major importance to fighting. Equipping said accessories is carried out via a merchant, who initially offers limited space for them that you can gradually increase in order to fit more so as to benefit as much as possible from the advantages they provide, which will absolutely come in handy when dealing with some of the most challenging enemies present present here, namely the bosses. Boss-wise, I'm glad to report that duking it out with the various big bads that prowled the academy was an incredibly fun endeavor, especially when it came to the main antagonists that wanted a shot at the Carmel crown. Each clash against them was quite exciting, featuring unique movesets and fully rewarding pattern recognition and attack telegraphing observation, while also boasting some solid difficulty balance by throwing fights at you that felt challenging and at times overwhelming, but never unfair. Speaking of difficulty, Kotama and Academy Citadel starts you off with 3 different choices, namely Story, which is the easiest one, Recommended, which is the equivalent to Normal, and Challenge, which is the hardest available, at least until you finish the game and unlock Reality, which is not for the faint of heart. I played on Recommended and cannot overstate how impressed I was by the overall sense of balance across the board, especially when it came to combat, which did get progressively easier as I got stronger, but never to the point where I felt like I wasn't in any danger, especially with some of the bosses, whom will completely obliterate you if not careful. At this point, it is important to mention that the map of the game can be explored in non-linear fashion to an extent, which can influence the order in which you will experience certain sections, including which big bads you'll get to fight first, thus resulting in a diverse understanding of the game's challenge level depending on how you'll go about exploring the academy. Lengthwise, it took me 16 hours and 40 minutes to complete the game with 98% completion rate and all endings achieved, while only missing the completion of the aforementioned nightmarish optional platforming gauntlet to reach 100%, which should take a maximum of 2 additional hours depending on player skill. For a price of about $20, Kotama and Academy Citadel offers incredible value for money. Before we conclude, I do want to bring attention to a specific technical issue I came across while playing. More specifically, there were a few areas where framerate dropped significantly when visiting, which I assume is related to the backgrounds of those areas being too busy. That being said, a couple of instances of framerate drops happened in rooms that I had never dealt with any issues before, and plummeted to unreasonably low levels to the point where the game became unplayable since it looked more like a slideshow, and I had to quit and restart in order to fix it. In conclusion, I had a lot of fun trying to become the Carmel Star in Kotama and Academy Citadel. I liked the story way more than I thought I would, even if it didn't hide any major twists and turns. I had a blast with exploration and the time travel gimmick attached to it. I absolutely loved the combat system, I thoroughly enjoyed platforming for the most part, and finally I found the boss fights to be awesome. On the downside, platforming did suffer a bit due to the somewhat stiff animations, inconsistent dash activation, and lack of explanation for the slime slingshot move. The map design lacked nuance in terms of structure, which often gave it a generic quality. The translation and placeholder art issues did come off as minor nuisances, and finally, there were the framerate issues, which thankfully were limited to only a few rooms, but still were mildly annoying. Kotama and Academy Citadel is an incredibly fun Metroidvania that boasts some interesting ideas, though mostly plays things by the numbers, which is not a bad thing since it does so quite well. If you're looking for a solid Metroidvania to sink several hours into, this one will definitely do the trick. My final verdict on Kotama and Academy Citadel is 7.5 out of 10. What did you think about Kotama and Academy Citadel? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out.